Rechata Ashera, Anat Malacha Ha'olam, Asher Kedeshanu Yitzvata, V'tzivanu L'Yitatif L'Tzitzit. Good morning, Erica. How are you? Yeah, this is what happens to my hair one day after showering. It has a life cycle that I cannot really control. I can only coax. I started showering a lot more often because it was the only way I could ask my hair politely what to do. But I mean, this is fine. It's just a lot. So it goes. Yiddish Judean. That's an interesting anachronism. Right? I mean, I suppose you could refer to Ashkenazi colonizers as Yiddish Judeans, right? Because there are people who spoke Yiddish who colonized the Judean desert in the 40s and 50s. Like, that's true. That happened. And I suppose they did look like me. Right? But Judean typically is used to refer to members of the kingdom of Judah. Like, what, 2,500 years ago? Long before Yiddish existed as a language. But, you know, we can compress history into a tiny little TikTok box and combine it all together. It'll work fine. Good morning, Jolie. How are you doing today? Shema Yisrael Asher Eloheinu Yahweh Echad. ואהבת את ענת אלוהיך ובכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך וחיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם ושבתך בביתך ולכתך עבדך ובשכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, וחיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, ובשעריך. וחיה, כי הביאך יהוה אלוהיך אל הארץ אשר נשבע לאבותיך, לאברהם ליצחק וליעקב, לתת לך ערים גדולות וטובות אשר לא בנית, ובתים מלאים כל טובה אשר לא מילאת, ובורות עצובים אשר לא עשת, גרים וזיתים אשר לא נתת, והלכת ושבת. ישמר לך פן תשכח את יראה אשר תשכחה מארץ מצרים מפת עבדים. Congratulations, Jolie. You are no longer a college student. How much longer are you living in Somerville? What, like 7 days? Imagine your lease expires on the 1st of June, something like that. And you're heading back to Chicago. Today? You're leaving today? Oh my god. What are you doing on TikTok? Get yourself to the airport. I'm happy for your big changes. It's good. It's really good. Good morning. So we can continue today where we left off in the Baal cycle. Right, so we have this story that was found on a number of clay tablets inscribed by a priest named Ilimiku. And where we're at in the story, Baal had just died. He had just died, right? He built a castle, he built a palace, he built a temple on the heights of the Mount of Zaphon to proclaim his holy kingship. And as soon as he was completed with that task, he discovered that despite the fact that he was the king of all the gods, he was not the king of death. And so death commands that he go down to the land of the underworld to die. And he does this, and Anat goes down to rescue him, right? This story is reminiscent of this story that we were reading a couple months ago. I don't know how many of you remember that. It's the same story. The gods have different names, but it's precisely the same story. Instead of Ishtar confronting Ereshkigal, we have Anat confronting the serpent of death, but it's the same story. So, where we were, Anat is preparing to go down to the realm of the dead and show, we'll read about her sacrifices, right? So a lot of this old stuff, you learn about the sacrifice tradition that was quite alive and well in First Temple Judaism, and then in Second Temple Judaism, and then was eliminated after the destruction of the Second Temple and the ascension of Jesus Christ into Baal's place in our understanding of the God that dies and is reborn. And sacrifice was ended, but at this point in time, sacrifice was alive and well, and so we have little phrases like, she brought him up to the peaks of Zaphon. She wept for him and buried him. She put him into the hole of the gods of the earth. She slaughtered 70 wild oxen as an oblation for Baal the conqueror. She slaughtered 70 plow oxen as an oblation for Baal the conqueror. She slaughtered 70 sheep as an oblation for Baal the conqueror. She slaughtered 70 deer as an oblation for Baal the conqueror. She slaughtered 70 mountain goats as an oblation for Baal the conqueror. She slaughtered 70 asses as an oblation for Baal the conqueror. She headed toward El, at the source of the two rivers. In the midst of the two seas pools, she opened El's tent and entered the shrine of the king, the father of time. At El's feet she bowed down and adored. She prostrated herself and worshipped him. She raised her voice and shouted, "Now let Asherah and her sons rejoice, the goddess and her pride of lions. For Baal the conqueror has died. The prince, lord of the earth, has perished." El called to the Lady Asherah of the sea. "Listen, Lady Asherah of the sea. Give me one of your sons. I'll make him king." And Lady Asherah of the sea replied, "Why not make Yadi Yalhan king?" But El, the kind, the compassionate, replied, "He's much too weak to race, to compete in spear throwing with Baal, with Dagon's son in contest." And so Lady Asherah of the sea replied, "Can't we make Athar the Awesome king? Let Athar the Awesome be king." Then Athar the Awesome went up to the peaks of Zaphon. He sat on Baal the Conqueror's throne. His feet did not reach the footstool. His head did not reach the headrest. And Athar the Awesome spoke, "I can't be king on the peaks of Zaphon." He gave up. Athar the Awesome descended. He descended from Baal the Conqueror's throne, and he became king of the underworld, the god of it all. See, this is very enigmatic, because the god of death already told Baal that he needed to descend down to the underworld. And so Athar is in this funny position where Asher's like, why don't you just be king? And so he goes up to the throne. He's like, nah, I can't be king. But there is no vacancy as the king of the Lord of the Dead. And yet Athar goes down there. And then we never hear about him again. These stories are not coherent, right? Like, they're just like bits. They're fragments from oral history. And remember, this is one version. We have this single version of all the thousands of versions that were told all around the city of Ugarit and around Canaan, right? We have this one version that Ilimiku decided to write down. And so there are going to be questions in it that we can't really parse. Like, I don't know who Athar is. This is, as far as I know, this is the only reference to him in the entire canon. But so we go. Anyway, after this, Anat is going to go down into the underworld to fight with the serpent and resurrect Baal. And I think we will save that for another day. I appreciate compliments on my voice. Thank you. God, what is this social environment, right? Like, I live for your compliments, like I do, right? Because that's the way that we interact. Like, that is the framing that we do this in. And I don't actually necessarily want all those compliments, but I absolutely do because of the framing, right? Like, I appreciate positive feedback. Like, oh yes, the voice practice that I did, it paid off. I can pretend to be a bunch of different gods and do it compellingly. Like, it's pretty special. So, other than a teacher, what other jobs have I had? Oh God, some of them I can't tell you about. But I live in community, right? So, like, my primary job is to be an empathetic and emotional listener of other people's problems. I've worked as a cook in a number of different professional settings. I worked as a cook at an anarchist puppet theater, as well as some summer camps and conference centers. What else have I done? I've been a carpenter. What other things? I ran a tech support business when I was 19. A silly little boy driving around Westchester, reformatting people's computers. What else have I done? I worked as a groundskeeper and a gardener and a farmer. I guess I still do that. I don't know. A job is a 20, what's that quote? Job is a 21st century, a career is a 21st century invention. I don't want one. Except I do want one. I just want it to be strange and unrepeatable and eclectic. Yeah, and I've taught a bunch of different things. And I guess I'm a TikToker now, for better or for worse. So now it is time for Arati. The word Arati means flame or light in Sanskrit. And we're gonna say the names of some various Indian gods. Hey, Jelly. Jaya Jayarti Vina Vinayaka Vina Vinayaka Shri Ganesha Jaya Jayarti Subramanya Subramanya Kartikeya Jaya Jayarti Venugopala Venugopala Venuola Papa Vidura Navanita Chora Jaya Jayarati Venkantaramana Venkantaramana Sankatarana Sita Rama Radhe Shama Jaya Jayarati Gauri Manohara Gauri Manohara Bhavani Sankara Samba Sadashiva Uma Maheshwara Jaya Jayarati Raja Rajeshwari Raja Rajeshwari Tripura Sundari Mahalakshmi Mahasaraswati Mahakali Mahashakti Jaya Jayarati Anjaneya Anjaneya Hanumanta Jaya Jayarati Dattatreya Dattatreya Trimutara Vatara Jaya Jayarati Adityaya Adityaya Bhaskaraya Jaya Jayarati Sanischaraya, Sanischaraya Bhaskaraya, and Jaya Jayarati Sankaracharya, Sankaracharya Advaita Gravi, Jaya Jayarati Sadgurunatha, Sadgurunatha Shivananda, and Jaya Jayarati Vishnu Devananda, Vishnu Devananda, Vishnu Devananda, Jaya Jayarati Agastya Munaye, Agastya Munaye, Shriyama Priyaye, Jaya Jayarati Ayapa Samine, Dharma Shastave, Jaya Jayarati Jesus Guravi, Moses Guravi, Buddha Guravi, Jaya Jayarati Muhammad Guravi, Guru Nanak Guravi, Samastya Gurubho Namaha, Jaya Jayarati Venugopala. What am I saying? Well, it's actually very simple. Yes, I do understand what I'm saying. In an interesting way, right? Like I don't understand Sanskrit grammar, right? But I do understand the literal meaning of basically every word in this prayer because the syntax of this prayer is extremely simple, right? So Jaya Jayarati, we wave the light, or we wave the light of victory, is in this translation here, right? And I often elide the concept of victory because I don't really want to be a conquering god on the top of the mountain of Zaphon, right? Like, I think that's an outdated concept. But yes, Jaya Jayarati means we wave the light, right? So we have this little light here. It's our little temple flame. This is a ubiquitous symbol, right? Like you see it in synagogues and in Hindu monasteries. And then there's just God names, right? Jaya Jayarati, Jesus Gurave, Moses Gurave, Buddha Gurave, Jaya Jayarati, Muhammad Gurave, Guru Nanak Gurave, Samastya Gubho Namaha, right? We wave the light to Jesus, Moses, Buddha, Muhammad, Guru Nanak, the guru of the Sikh tradition, and to all gurus and prophets, right? And that's basically what every phrase here means, right? Like the fact that that verse was inserted here means that you know that this prayer has been modified in recent years, right? Like it's been modified for an American audience that might have more familiarity with Jesus and Muhammad and Moses than they do with, say, Anjaneya or Raja Rajeshwari, right? So the earlier parts of the prayer contain Indian deities and the names of gurus in this particular tradition, right? Like we repeat the name of Shivananda, Vishnu Devananda, right? These are real historical figures that were alive not even a century ago that put together this prayer book. And then they, put the Western figures right next to the Eastern figures, and they say all of them, we can wave the light to all of them, right? So it's a very syncretistic prayer. It's a very inclusive prayer. And so I like to couple it with the prayers from earlier that says, hey, only worship Yahweh. Yahweh, my Lord and Savior. Like, I'll worship Yahweh, right? Like I have to. It's genetically obligated of me. But I'm going to do so in a context that I find comfortable. So I say this prayer as context. Natatra Sayobati Natandragaratam Nemavidyobati Kutari Magni Twameva Bantamanabanti Sarvam Tasya Basya Samidam Vivanti Om Gange Karyamune Kaivagovari Saraswati Narmade Siddhu Kaveri Hiya Samastitam Namo Namaha. I am genetically obligated. I'm obligated because my grandmother was deeply traumatized and lost her entire family. That's an obligation. Right? Like, you can't just abandon that God. He caused a genocide. It's very powerful, Twameva mata, Japita Twameva, Twameva bandisha saka, Twameva vidya, Javinam Twameva sarvam mama deva deva, Kayena vacha manasendriyarva, Buddhyatmanava prakrite sabhavad, Karomi adyad mangalam parasmahi, Narayana iti sarmarpayami. Sarvadharmam pravichaya mamikam saranam praja, Amsva sarvapapayo mokshayami masucha. Whatever actions I perform with my body, speech, mind, senses, my nature, my intellect, or my emotions, all these I dedicate to you. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm glad you're back, Jelly. It's really nice to know that I can offer that kind of consistency for someone. It's important, I think. So, now we will say Kaddish. Kaddish for all those who died yesterday and the day before that. Right? Like, genetically obligated, right? Like, I think I showed you this. Like, this is a little pamphlet that has Kaddish on it that came from my grandmother's funeral, right? It says her name right on here, Esther Schoenfeld. So, like, literally, I read this, I say Kaddish for her, right? And I think about that trauma. Like, I truly do think that I have a genetic obligation. You'd love to hear a directional prayer in the litany? I don't quite know what you mean there, Ishtaras. A directional prayer. What, like north, south, east, west? A pagan thing. Right, like, the history that my immediate ancestors went through makes me feel obligated to say these words, right? Like, there's quite a lot to mourn. And we can expand it further back, right? Like, I don't actually want to be fixated on the Holocaust, even though it did structure my grandmother's life and my mother's life intensely. Right? Like, Kaddish is a universal need. A need to mourn and grieve. Like, I often think that the social system that we live in today doesn't actually give us proper outlets to mourn in, right? Like, reading in the Baal cycle, they talk about, like, their mourning rituals where they're, like, literally cutting themselves and ripping their clothing publicly as this, like, theatrical display of grief. Right? And I don't necessarily think that's the best way either, but I've, read ethnographies. Like, public grieving is a thing that is much more common in other cultures than ours. Oh, hi.
Oh, hi.
I'm saying Kaddish.
That's great.
And you brought kale. Oh my gosh, that's a lot.
I picked every bowl.
Look at this incredible bouquet that I have been brought. Hey, thanks, love.
You're welcome.
Could you put some in the cooker?
Yeah.
Do you want to eat it with me in a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Ishtaras, what's a directional prayer? If I can do it, I'll do it. I don't quite understand. Anyway, we say Kaddish so that we can publicly grieve together for the many things in the world that are worth grieving. Yikadal v'kadash shemei rabba v'yalma divrach yute v'yamlich malchute b'chayachon uv'yamechon uv'chaye de kol beit Israel Bagala v'izman karif v'imru. Amen. Yehi shemei rabba mipa'ach le'alam olmei olmaya yitbarach v'ishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitnahar v'yithaleh v'yithalal shemei de kudisha barichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata diamiran v'yama v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yachol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. O say shalom b'imramav, huya asay shalom, aleinu v'yachol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. O say shalom b'imramav, huya asay shalom aleinu, v'yachol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. I like saying it with you.
Yeah, it's our name.
It is our name. Yeah, the language is in Hebrew. Yeah. Jolie, it doesn't surprise me at all to hear that your family escaped from that, right? And there's war there now, today still. Right? That region has been full of violence for all of living memory. And so we still say Kaddish for all those still there. Why don't you guess? God's weary warrior is alive. You can just guess. Alright, well, I think that's all for today. But I had a really lovely time with you all. And, I'll be back here tomorrow to say these words once more. And I hope to see you there. Have a lovely day, friends.